Hey, what's up everyone? Morey Croson here, and today we're going to be going over how to get faster. We're going to start the video right now. This is the newest edition of the Performance Lab.
Reach your individual goals. You don't want to just talk about straight line speed. We also want to talk about your ability to be quick. We break down your video. Let's make you into the quarterback I know you can become.
Alright, so I love to break things down in the most simplest terms as I possibly can, and so what we're going to be going over today is what are the three ways to get faster, right? At the end of the day, there's only really three ways to actually improve your speed, and so you have to understand where it is that you need to be able to actually make improvement in order to, make the fastest amount of, improvement in the least amount of time. That ends up being the goal, is how fast can I get faster? Okay, and so what we're looking at is three things. How much time you're spending on the ground, right? So as you're cycling through, every time your foot hits the ground, how much time does it take for you to then get off the ground? Typically, we're wanting to get 0.1 second or below here. The next thing is turnover speed. This is essentially how much time are you spending off the ground. Okay, so how much time is your foot spending on the ground? How much time is your foot spending off the ground? This is going to be somewhere between 0.3 to 0.36, kind of depending on your height. And the last thing is distance per step. And this is going to be different for everybody depending on their height. Some people want to be getting more distance per step, and some people want to be getting less distance per step. More distance or less distance, right? So that ends up being based off of your height, and when you look at yourself running, what are some of the things that you do really well or not so well, and then you can get a better understanding of what your distance per step should be. Typically it's going to be like 2.5 yards-ish is going to be what you should be doing if you're like 6 foot, but again, it's all based kind of off of your height and when you actually watch yourself run. So let's get into really how to improve in these areas. So let's first get into contact time, because what I see a lot of is, and even when I played, what ended up being the thing was, okay, I want to get faster. Okay, so in order to get faster, you got to squat more, right? Or you got to jump higher, or you got to. So the question then becomes, right, if we're saying that we need to be able to improve in these three areas, how does squatting more come to play here, right? Or deadlifting more, okay? Like, why does that matter, right? Because I'm sure there's a lot of you guys that are watching this that have heard what I just said, right? Oh, you want to run faster? You got to squat more, okay? Or deadlift more, or you got to hit the weight room, or you got to work on your jumping, or whatever the case may be, okay? And so while that isn't wrong, I think that there wants to be some degree of specificity and understanding, so then when we go and we squat more, because what happened to me is that I went and I was running 4.59-ish, 4.6, and I went to squat more, and then I started running closer to 4.65, squat more, 4.7, right? So that ended up not working, right? Because that will not work if you don't implement the right things. Because what happened is that I went and I was able to squat more, but I also ended up spending more time on the ground. Because what happens is that if you end up having a strong or a foot contact that's good, when you squat more, you could end up having more knee bend during foot contact, which makes it so the amount of time that I spend on the ground increases, okay? So what ends up impacting foot contact time, so foot contact time is an issue for you, okay? If you're spending more than 0.1 second on the ground, okay, when you go and do any type of technical analysis, or even when you're landing, if you're landing and you notice that your leg is not really straight, your knee's not really straight during the actual landing, now you know that foot contact time ends up being an important part, and what you want to really work on is more plyometric type movements. So those are going to be broad jumps, depth jumps, balance type drills, depth jumps, sorry here, balance. Okay, and then also just drills to help you to understand when your foot lands. You want to be landing with your leg basically straight, the best you can possibly can, keeping that whole leg straight during that foot contact. And again, you want to watch some of the top athletes in the world and understand this is a top end speed, right? So we have three different phases. We have your start, we have your drive, and we have top end speed. I've done a few of these videos here recently, And the main thing that we want to talk about here is top end speed. I think that if we can get your top end speed really good, then it really sets you up in, some of these other areas. So what we're going over here now is going to be just top end speed. Okay, so when you're at your top end speed, you want to be landing with your leg as straight as you can and with your foot as close to right underneath your hip as you possibly can. So that means you have great frontside mechanics and great backside mechanics. And when you're landing, you want to be able to maintain a lot of stability. So when you land, you don't want to end up having a lot of knee bend, right? A lot of deceleration to then have to go and accelerate, right? You want to be able to control deceleration so it just ends up being more of a rebound rather than a stop and go, stop and go, stop and go. The more time that you spend, having to slow yourself down and speed yourself up, then the longer your foot contact's going to be. The more what you want to be doing is just like rebounding. You hit the ground, boom, you bounce right back off, bounce right back off. That's how your foot contact wants to be. Then we're going to go into turnover speed, okay? To me, what's most important about being able to turn your legs over is the control of your hips, right? So what controls your hips? All the muscles of the core. So now we have to be able to, and then also hamstrings. Glutes are technically part of the core, but we'll put that in there as well. So are your hip flexors, lateral stabilizers. So all these muscles end up being super important when it comes to how your legs are actually moving, right? So if you are able to control your hips and make it so, your hip flexors are active, your hamstrings are active, so we'll end up making it so you spend too much time in your turnover is, one would be not having very flexible hamstrings or very flexible even quads where you can go and get into immediate knee flexion, right? Where you cycle that leg right back up. And then from there, you got to be able to drive your leg through and have great hip flexor strength there to be able to drive your whole leg through. And also when you're doing that, maintain, a very straight position. So you don't want to end up going too much with your knees coming inwards and going into adduction or abduction or internal rotation, external rotation. You want to be very, very controlled as you're bringing the hips through. And that goes into, your turnover speed. And you also have to be strong in the core. You got to be strong in the posture. All those things have to be very, very strong. Okay? And so let's go back to how do these potentially help? I would say squatting, one-legged squats have a better turnover or a better carryover. Deadlifting with the lower back, it can help. You just got to be able to keep extension in the low back, right? Because we see people that will do deadlifts that are super rounded. That's not helping you get fast. That's making you slow down. You have to have a great extension. You have to have great mobility in that lower back. And because when you're running, what ends up making it so you have a poor ability to turn over your legs is an inability to have good flexibility within your lower back or the inability to extend and then flex within your lower back. Most people do not have an issue with flexing their spine, right? We're all sitting down, we're always in a flex position all the time. And so they mostly have an issue with extending the spine. So one leg needs to be able to extend and really be able to get a strong push off, right? And that again goes into like the plyometrics and things like that. And so they have to be able to get great extension to then be able to, drive the leg through to be able to generate a good amount of power forward, right? Because you have to be able to, it's a push and pull, it's a yin and yang. That's how you generate force. You have to be able to, really push and pull with a lot of strength there, right? So you have to push off the ground, right? And then be able to go pull yourself back forward so then you can push back off the ground with a lot of force again, okay? And so the more effective you're able to push and pull is going to go into, this is where you could build that up in the weight room, is how well you're able to push and pull. Now, when you utilize that, it has to transfer over into how you're moving into the way that's the most effective, right? So you can't be doing, you can't have a lot of push-pull, activation here, and then that translate into way too long of turnover speed times, right? Or way too long of foot contact times. You have to be able to be very efficient in how your leg's turning over, but if you don't have the necessary amount of, strength to be able to really generate a lot of force off the ground or force into the ground, then that's where you need to start. Okay, is being able to generate the force. Then once you are able to build that, now you could utilize that in improving your speed training, okay, or improving your turnover speed and getting some of those hundredths of a second, a little bit faster. But you want to be able to, because there's some people that are, younger athletes that could just work more on turnover speed and then develop this later. There are some people that are already very developed with their, older athletes are already very strong, and they need to start to put more of a emphasis on, turnover speed. So with younger athletes, a lot of times, we'll spend time doing both, but I put a little bit more of an emphasis on building their strength, right? I'm not doing a ton of deadlifts and stuff like that yet, but I'm trying to build up just basic strength and then utilizing that to then implement back into these two areas. Or you can go and, if you're already really strong, now you almost maintain your strength and be able to then put that into improved turnover speed. All right, so that ends up being the main thing that you want to be able to understand is how can you use your strength to actually help you get faster? And going into some of these mechanics ends up being critical to be able to do that. All right, the last thing is going to be the distance per step. This ends up being super important when it comes to really maximizing each step and obviously, how much distance we are actually getting as we're running. The most common thing that I see is people are just like too rapid fire with their feet, right? So they're just not picking up very much distance per step. They're very quick and short and not actually really maximizing their front side mechanics, right? And don't have great posture. A lot of times those people, they have fast turnover speed and okay foot contact time, right? And they're just end up going really, really quick with their legs. I made a video about crossing over. A lot of them will end up crossing over as well. And again, just have a real focus on turning over really quickly, but actually don't go anywhere fast, right? So they're moving their legs fast, but aren't picking up very much distance, which ends up really making a big difference when it comes to, how to get faster, right? How do you really end up being a top tier sprinter? You got to be able to really maximize those front side mechanics and pick up a lot of distance per step. I talked a little bit about it before. About 2.5 yards is going to be a good, general place for you to be at. Again, per step comes out to be like 2.2-ish meters. So that ends up being about where you're gonna be. It's gonna be different though, depending on how tall you are, what some of your anthropometrics are, right? So like how long are your legs, how long are your limbs, all that stuff ends up making a big difference. So, two main things I would look at when it comes to distance per step, is are you really turning your legs over quickly and not going, anywhere fast? So you can go and look at, if you're running the 100 or in the 40, yard dash, 60-yard dash, or even 60-meter, you could look at a few different athletes and see, okay, this is where, a lot of them are when it comes to, when they run like the 40-yard dash. This is how much distance they're able to, or how many steps, right? Somebody that's your same height, maybe let's say 5'10", go find somebody that ran a good 40-yard dash, that's 5'10", see how many steps that he took. Or somebody that ran the 100-meter, maybe at 6'1", see how many steps he took. And that'll be a good way for you to understand where you should be at within that same distance, okay? And that will then give you the reference of like, okay, am I, not picking up enough distance per step? A lot of people suffer from this. I suffer from this as well. Or do you have really long strides and need to work on your turnover and your foot contact time? That's something that we'll see a lot too. It's not like I don't see that, but just again, from a priority perspective or like the most common mistake I see is this one. There will be people that will struggle with picking up too much distance per step on each one of their strides and are really spending too much time on the ground and too much time with their turnover. So it's different for everybody, but this is really how to get faster, right? Let's really break it down, make it as simple as possible. Obviously, this doesn't look super simple when you're looking at it from the end, but hopefully you were able to follow me through all that. And if it helped you, go ahead and click that thumbs up down below, subscribe to the channel down below. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, we'd love to help you guys out with that. Check out the 28-day free speed program. Check out some of the things that we have in the description down below. We're gonna keep on trying to help you guys out with improving your speed. This information I think ends up being vital when it comes to actually understanding how you can get faster and doing it as quickly as you possibly can. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.